Ron. Lydia gnashed her teeth as she uttered the name, compared to Maggie, who always liked to compete with her for things. Ron's betrayal cut her even deeper. Lydia's sudden appearance momentarily stunned the two people on the sofa who were engaging in their daytime debauchery. However, being shameless people by nature, they merely paused briefly when Lydia opened the door, quickly returning to their calm demeanor. Maggie leisurely dismounted from Ron's body, even giving Lydia a disdainful glance before walking naturally into their bedroom to change clothes. Seeing Maggie's familiar appearance shattered the last trace of hope in Lydia's heart. She was indeed foolish. Maggie was so familiar with this place, indicating she had been here more than once. She even seemed more like the host of this house than Lydia herself. Ron showed no intention of avoiding the situation. He casually lit a cigarette, reclining on the sofa, exhaling smoke clouds, and spoke with extreme disdain. "What is wrong with you? Don't you know how to knock when you come in?" Lydia was stunned, tears of anger welling up in her eyes. Did she need their permission to come into her own house? How shameless could these two people be? "Why? I've been loyal to you, tried my best to be a good wife. Why would you treat me like this?" Lydia stared fixedly into Ron's eyes. Once, she had loved those warm and tender eyes, always filled with ripples, irresistibly captivating, but now she realized what swirled in those eyes was not warmth, but conspiracy. Ron sneered, his refined face softening a bit, his usually gentle eyes now filled with disdain and mockery. "Lydia, to say you are stupid, you truly are. You heard what was said just now. What else is there to explain?" Lydia's eyes also turned red as she raised her voice. "I just want a reason. A reason why you betrayed me. You were the one who pursued me first. You promised me a lifetime of happiness. But now..." Ron calmly looked at Lydia, whose emotions were on the verge of collapse, his eyes showing no emotion. He nonchalantly blew a smoke ring, extinguishing the cigarette in the ashtray. "Betrayal, huh? I don't think so." At this moment, Maggie emerged from inside, dressed in the clothes Lydia immediately recognized as the set Ron had specifically gifted her on her birthday. At the time, she had wondered why the size seemed off, but since it was the first gift Ron had ever given her, she had said nothing and carefully stored it in the closet. Now, it was clear that the clothes were not meant for her. They were clearly Maggie's size. Maggie gave Ron a dissatisfied look. What is with all this pointless talk with her? Lydia's mind was already in chaos, staggering backward 2 steps. Maggie stepped forward aggressively. "Lydia, since you are so eager to know the so-called truth, I'll tell you straight. Ron and I have known each other long before you. We've been together for almost 5 years. Lydia's legs gave out, and she fell to the ground, realizing it was indeed true. She felt so much hatred, so much resentment. In that case, why did Ron actively pursue me? She wanted to hear the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Who do you think you are? Some celestial being worthy of Ron's pursuit. If it wasn't for your family's inheritance, I wouldn't even bother with you." Lydia felt waves of darkness enveloping her vision. She bit her lip hard, the pain from her tongue helping her regain some semblance of rationality. Her hands clenched into fists, nails digging deeply into her palms. Yet she seemed not to feel the pain at all. She wanted to listen. She wanted to understand everything clearly. She wanted to unravel the causes and consequences of this situation, to remember who owed her and who betrayed her. From now on, Lydia would completely cut ties with these despicable people. With things having reached this point, Lydia had completely calmed down. She had understood everything now. It turned out that what they valued was just the assets left behind by her grandfather. Slowly rising from the ground, tears already streaming down her face, Lydia's heart was dead, her tears unable to flow anymore. She felt like all the blood in her body had congealed, her heart colder than ice. Trembling, she looked at Ron in despair. You never loved me, did you? Lydia. Stop this nonsense. Do you think asking such questions now is meaningful? Ron didn't answer. Instead, Maggie took over, but Lydia stubbornly kept staring at Ron as if she wouldn't relent until he answered. Ron's face darkened slightly, a hint of impatience creeping in. Are you deaf, or is your brain filled with shit? We've already made things so clear, yet you still ask if I ever loved you. Ridiculous. Just seeing you makes me nauseous. How could I ever love you? Boom! Lydia felt the last glimmer of hope in her heart shatter. Her eyes swollen with tears, she unexpectedly calmed down when facing this man, with whom she had spent more than 300 days and nights. Let's get divorced. Divorced? Since you and Maggie love each other, let's get divorced. I'll make way for you two. Lydia, you are too naive. Want a divorce? No way. Lydia was confused, her mind blank. What did this mean? A trace of disdain flashed in Ron's eyes as he exchanged a glance with Maggie. He chuckled first, then Maggie went into the room and brought out a few sheets of paper, tossing them in front of Lydia. If you want a divorce, sign this first. Originally thinking it was a divorce agreement, Lydia, upon seeing the contents, felt her blood boil and her vision darken. This was not a divorce agreement at all. It was a property transfer list. The agreement stated that Lydia voluntarily transferred all the inheritance to her husband Ron to compensate for the emotional damage caused by her infidelity. This was their plan. Lydia's heart ached with anger. How could they be so shameless? With a trembling hand holding the agreement, she said, "You two are the most despicable pair of scoundrels I've ever seen." Maggie sneered at her, sitting arrogantly on the sofa opposite her, crossing her legs and trimming her nails nonchalantly. "Don't forget to sign it when you are done cursing." Lydia, furious, felt her head throb. She bit her tongue hard, the taste of blood and pain helping her calm down a bit. With a few quick movements, she tore up the agreement and threw it in Maggie's face. Dream on. That inheritance was left to me by my grandfather, and has nothing to do with you two. I'll definitely divorce you, but you won't get a penny. After saying this, Lydia turned and left, feeling nauseous about everything in that place. Maggie stomped her feet in anger, pouting as she said to Ron, "Ron, look, she is so mean to me. Don't worry. She can't escape from us." Ron pulled Maggie into his arms, his eyes flashing with a cold light. As Lydia left the villa, she realized she had nowhere to go. Standing sorrowfully on the bustling street, amidst the throng of people, she felt abandoned by the world overnight. She had no home, no purity, and even the love she once believed in turned out to be a sham. She bitterly smiled, unable to hold back her tears. The immense blow left her physically and emotionally exhausted. Suddenly, her head throbbed, her vision blurred, and she collapsed unconscious on the busy street. Lydia was awakened by hunger. She hadn't eaten or drunk anything for a day and a night, and her stomach had been rumbling for a while. She slowly opened her eyes, finding the surroundings dim. As she adjusted to the light, she realized she was in what seemed to be a warehouse. Some sunlight filtered in through the skylight, providing just enough warmth to keep Lydia from feeling too cold. Where was she? She remembered being on the street with the sound of waves faintly echoing in her ears. Could this be a warehouse near the beach? The door suddenly swung open, and the glaring light made Lydia shield her face with her hand. As she adjusted to the brightness, she couldn't help but widen her eyes. "Awake, are you? How do you feel? Surprised to see us." Maggie's face carried a mocking smile, ridiculing Lydia's naivety and foolishness. Why didn't she just sign the agreement? Instead, she had to make things so complicated, only to end up in their hands anyway. Ron stood next to Maggie, his gaze cold and unfamiliar to Lydia, making her feel like she was facing a venomous snake. "Did you kidnap me?" Lydia asked. Maggie clicked her tongue twice. Darling sister, don't be so harsh. How could this be a kidnapping? We simply wanted to invite you back for a nice chat. Besides, we rescued you from the busy street. Otherwise, wouldn't you have been run over by passing cars? Lydia stared at them, eyes wide. What do you want? I won't give you my grandfather's inheritance. Lydia. I don't think you've realized your situation yet. Do you think you have a choice? Ron sneered and took out an agreement. Sign it obediently. It is beneficial for both you and us. Filled with grief and anger, Lydia spat at Ron. You beast, bastard. This is illegal. I'll call the police and have you arrested. Haha, that is if you can get out first. At this point, do you think you can leave if you don't sign this agreement? Ron's mocking smile irritated Lydia's nerves. She clenched her fists, her mind unexpectedly clear. She surveyed the warehouse, considering her escape options. With her hands and feet weak, even if she wanted to run, she didn't have the strength. Lydia suddenly quieted down, surprising Maggie and Ron. After a moment of silence, Lydia spoke again. Fine, bring me some food first. I am hungry now, too weak to sign anything. Maggie frowned. Don't try to play tricks. What? Can't you even fulfill such a small request, or are you afraid that if I eat, I'll escape? Lydia knew in her heart that whether she signed or not, she would die. These despicable people wouldn't let her go. She hated it, hated the injustice of fate, hated herself for being so blind, falling for such a heartless man, and hated the cruelty of these scoundrels. She couldn't die. She had to live. She had to get revenge. She would make sure these scoundrels had no place to bury themselves. You are not capable of that. Ron sneered and signaled Maggie to prepare some food for Lydia. Maggie grumbled but went out anyway. After a while, she brought Lydia a bowl of noodles and a bowl of water. Hungry, Lydia ate quickly without saying much. When she finished the noodles, she poured the water onto the ground. The water's cold. I want hot water. Ron signaled to Maggie, and she reluctantly went out again. When she returned, she brought Lydia a bowl of hot water, steaming gently. Gritting her teeth, Lydia stepped forward and grabbed the hot water from Maggie's hand, then swiftly threw it at Ron's face. Caught off guard, Ron was scalded by the boiling water, which also broke the skin on his scalp as the bowl shattered on his head. Blood mixed with water dripped down his face, making him look somewhat miserable. Ah! Ron cried out in pain, and Maggie rushed forward to check on him. Seizing the opportunity, Lydia dashed for the door. Don't worry about me. That bitted H has run away. Ron, his face twisted in pain, covered the wound on his head with one hand and hurriedly chased after Lydia, with Maggie following closely behind. Lydia didn't know if it was lucky or unlucky, but there wasn't a soul outside the warehouse. However, not far away seemed to be a cliff with the deep blue sea below. Ron and Maggie caught up with her. Despite her desperation, Lydia ran without considering anything else. Betrayal and pain filled her mind with only one thought: she mustn't let Ron and Maggie succeed. She couldn't let them capture her again. Running frantically, Lydia failed to notice that the direction of her escape was flawed. Her strength waned, and her steps gradually lost their initial lightness. Gasping for air, her lungs felt as if they were stuffed with sponges, making it hard to breathe. In contrast, despite his injury, Ron, being a man, quickly caught up with Lydia's pace. Maggie followed closely behind. As Lydia ran, she realized there was no path ahead anymore. The surging waves crashed against the cliffs, roaring menacingly. Lydia froze in her tracks, despair filling her eyes. Why aren't you running, you bitch? Ron walked up to Lydia from behind. Although his head wound had stopped bleeding, he still looked battered and fierce, like a demon from hell. Gritting her teeth, Ron approached and grabbed Lydia's arm, delivering a harsh slap to her face. Maggie, gasping for breath, also stopped and muttered, "This bitch can run all right, but it is useless. Even if she can run, it won't help. Not even heaven's on her side." Ron used considerable force, causing Lydia's face to swell instantly. The searing pain, accompanied by the ringing in her ears, made Lydia's mind foggy. Then, Ron flung her to the ground. The sharp stones cut into her skin, and blood stained the rocks. Lydia's disheveled hair fell around her face, hiding her expression. Lydia's sorry state pleased Ron and Maggie, somewhat easing their earlier anger. Stepping forward, Ron grabbed Lydia by her hair, forcing her to look up. After the sorrow and despair, hatred surged in Lydia's bright eyes like a burning flame, waiting for an opportunity to consume everything in its path. "Bitch, how dare you hit me?" Ron yelled as he delivered another slap, causing blood to flow from Lydia's mouth, a chilling sight. Maggie stepped forward and grabbed Ron's hand. "Enough. Don't beat her to death. We're still waiting for her to sign." Hatred filled Lydia's eyes as she stared directly at the couple before her. "Aren't you afraid of retribution for what you are doing?" Maggie sneered. "Retribution. What is that? Just something useless people make up to scare themselves. If there were such a thing as retribution in this world, your dad and my mom would have already experienced it." Lydia's eyes widened. "What do you mean? Her father? Her mother?" A bad feeling crept over her. Maggie's smile turned more sinister. "Oh, you still don't know. Since you look so pitiful, I'll tell you. Your mom's accident wasn't just an accident. It was your dad and my mom who killed her. So don't talk to me about retribution. I don't believe in it." Lydia's mind went blank, as if something had exploded inside her, tearing her apart. Her heart seemed to stop beating, and she couldn't find the words to speak. Tears streamed down her face, tasting bitter and salty. "Mom," Lydia murmured softly, her eyes filled with despair and confusion. How could there be such malicious people in the world? Her own father actually committed such a despicable act. He didn't love her, was cold to her, and though she was saddened by it, she never blamed him because he was her biological father. But who would have thought that there was such a shocking secret hidden beneath it all? She had always thought her mother's death was just an accident. So even when her stepmother entered their lives, Lydia didn't show much hostility, and even took good care of her stepsister, Lydia's half-sister. But in the end, the woman she had always addressed as aunt turned out to be her mother's murderer, and now she was forced into such a situation. It was ridiculous and tragic. The whistling wind mixed with the crashing waves woke Lydia from her stupor, igniting a determined gleam in her eyes. Even if she died, she wouldn't let these scoundrels take away her grandfather's inheritance. They weren't worthy. Slowly, Lydia stood up from the ground, her slender figure straight and proud, like a snow lotus blooming on the edge of despair. The wind lifted her long hair, which danced in the air as she took steps back, yet she still smiled mockingly at Ron and Maggie. "You won't get anything. One day you'll face your comeuppance. I curse you. May you never obtain your heart's desires. May you destroy yourselves, fall into poverty, and live a wretched life. Death is better than you." Ron crawled to the edge of the cliff, watching as the waves carried Lydia's disappearing figure away. Frustrated, he pounded the ground and shouted at Maggie. "Didn't I tell you to catch her?" Maggie was initially stunned by Ron's outburst. Then she retorted in frustration, "Why are you yelling at me? Her dying isn't that bad. Saves you from worrying about her all the time." Ron's eyes blazed with anger. "You know nothing. According to the will, if Lydia dies unexpectedly, all the money will be donated to charity. Now we won't get a penny. Damn it, we've been wasting our time for nothing." Maggie's expression shifted from annoyance to realization. Oh, then we need to find her body before anyone else does. We have to make sure there is no chance of her being rescued. Ron nodded vigorously. Exactly. Let's search the area and make sure there is no trace of her left. We can't risk her being found alive. With a grim determination, they began scouring the surroundings for any sign of Lydia's presence, driven by their desire to ensure that their plans wouldn't be thwarted by her potential survival. Maggie looked at the empty ocean with wide eyes and a little disbelief in her ears. What are we going to do, in the end? The two cursed and left each other. The lingering wind blew away all the sins, and the seaside was as calm as if nothing had ever happened before. 6 years later, Nova City Airport just landed from Paris. Among the crowd, a woman slowly walked out from the exit passage. She had long, golden hair, so silky and shiny that it could rival those models in shampoo commercials. The woman had slender wrists, and delicate fingers were holding onto a soft and adorable Wythe. Wythe was about 5 years old, with a round face that looked serious at the moment. Only his eyes were darting around mischievously, making him look particularly cute and clever. Since landing from the plane and setting foot on the land of Nova City again, Wythe noticed that his mother's mood seemed somewhat off. Therefore, he behaved very well along the way, not causing any trouble. Lydia's heart was filled with mixed emotions. She was back. After jumping into the sea years ago, she miraculously survived, rescued by a kind person, and taken out of the country. It was the lowest point in her life, being alone in a foreign land with no family, no friends, and no job. She almost couldn't make it. Ironically, it was during that time she was found to be pregnant. Wythe's arrival was truly unexpected, but it also became her motivation to stand up again. So step by step, she started from being a seamstress and gradually reached where she was today. All the events of 6 years ago were buried deep in Lydia's heart, never to be forgotten. Ron and Maggie's framing and betrayal, the truth about her mother's unjust death. Everything felt like a nightmare buried deep within her, constantly reminding her to stay strong. One day, she would come back for revenge, and now, she had returned. Mama, you are hurting me. Wythe's voice brought Lydia back from those sad memories. Lydia then realized that she had accidentally applied too much force on Wythe's little hand, making it red. Sorry, sweetheart. Let Mama massage it for you. Lydia felt both heartache and guilt, gently kissing Wythe's little hand before carefully massaging it. Wythe, with a serious face, rolled his eyes. It hurt more when she massaged it. But this was his mother's loving care. Even though it hurt a bit, as a little man, he couldn't show it. Okay, Mama, we can continue walking now. This is the exit. Staying here will cause congestion, and we shouldn't trouble the airport staff uncles and aunties. Watching her son earnestly educating her, Lydia found it amusing yet exasperating. Many times, she even doubted whether she was the adult or if the child was. Got it. I am back. A low, sexy voice came from beside her, causing Lydia to freeze in place. Her gaze involuntarily followed that figure. It was an extremely tall man, dressed in a perfectly fitted smoke gray suit. From her designer's perspective, it was definitely tailor-made, most likely by a master craftsman. His well-defined fingers held a cell phone to his ear, occasionally uttering a word or two. He exuded a certain aura and aloofness that kept people at a distance. That figure overlapped with someone from Lydia's memory, causing her steps to involuntarily pause. Then she averted her eyes, self-mockingly shaking her head. After so many years, even if this person was that person, so what? Since the man she had a one-night stand with 6 years ago left no messages or clues, Wythe belonged to her alone now. During Lydia's momentary distraction, Wythe followed her gaze and saw the man's figure. He tilted his head curiously, wondering if Mama had finally come to her senses and was planning to find him a dad as soon as possible. Wythe shook his head. Mama wasn't that self-aware. It seemed like he would have to take matters into his own hands if he wanted to find a dad. The mother and son walked a little further. Lydia felt the urge to use the restroom, so she asked Wythe to wait outside while she went in. Walking through the long corridor, Lydia unexpectedly saw the familiar figure again. The man was briskly pushing open the door to the restroom, heading to the urinal. Even with such a mundane action, he did it with unparalleled elegance and grace. Lydia, following him in a daze, saw his fierce lower body and suddenly snapped back to reality. She let out a high-pitched scream, instinctively covering her eyes with her hands, her cheeks flushed, and stood there stiffly, unsure of what to do. Lambert furrowed his brows slightly, but remained calm, as he continued to relieve himself. The sound of water hitting the urinal made Lydia's face even redder. She angrily shouted, "You pervert!" Little did Lydia know that Lambert, seeing her in this state, had a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Memories from many years ago flashed through his mind, and his heart couldn't help but stir. It was her. Lambert's eyes flickered with a hint of complexity for a moment, but quickly returned to calmness. He finished urinating, zipped up his pants, washed his hands at the sink, and then slowly walked over to Lydia, removing her hand covering her eyes. Lydia's gaze darted around, her face flushed, not knowing where to look. Lambert's action made her feel like a cat with its tail stepped on, and she pushed Lambert's hand away instinctively. What do you want?" Lambert's dark eyes were deep, his demeanor calm and indifferent as he pointed to the prominent smoking pipe symbol on the restroom door. "Miss, this is the men's restroom. You've walked into the wrong place." Swish! Lydia felt extremely embarrassed and angry. Her face felt like it was burning. She stuttered out an apology. "Sorry." Then, with her head down and eyes closed, she awkwardly crouched under Lambert's arm and hurriedly escaped. A faint scent seemed to linger in the air, and Lambert watched the flustered figure with a slight smirk on his lips. Lydia felt extremely embarrassed after leaving the restroom. The heat on her face still hadn't dissipated, and then she realized she had originally wanted to use the restroom. Wythe approached her. "Mom, can we go now?" Lydia squatted down with a guilty conscience, feeling embarrassed. "Sorry, honey. Mom might need to go again." Wythe, with an expressionless face, shrugged his shoulders, feeling speechless. A confused mom was a pain. "Well, Mom, you better hurry then. I'll wait for you." Suddenly, Lydia felt that Wythe's expressionless face was exactly like that powerful man from earlier. She must be bewitched. When Lydia finally calmed down and walked out of the restroom, a man was already standing beside Wythe. The man was wearing a khaki cardigan and black casual pants. He looked handsome and elegant. When he saw Lydia, his eyes lit up, and a wave of affection surged forth. "Lydia, Andrew, what are you doing here?" Lydia was also pleasantly surprised. The man in front of her was Andrew from her university days, who had always taken care of her back then. They lost contact after she married Ron, because Ron didn't like him. They reconnected 2 years ago when she accidentally met him at a fashion show in Paris, and they re-established their friendship. Lydia never expected Andrew to come to pick her up. Andrew looked at Lydia with gentle eyes. "Knowing you were coming back, of course I had to come. You haven't been back to the country for many years. It wouldn't be right without a familiar face to help you settle in." Lydia smiled. "Andrew, you are still as kind-hearted as ever, always worrying about others." Andrew, feeling a bit disappointed by being labeled as the good guy, cleared his throat and touched his nose. "As long as you like it." Andrew noticed Wythe's serious gaze and felt curious. "What is up, Wythe?" Earlier, when Lydia was away, They had exchanged names, and Andrew learned that Wythe was Lydia's son, but he also learned something important. Wythe didn't have a father. Andrew, who had long been fond of Lydia, made up his mind to win over this important little man in Lydia's heart. After helping Lydia and her son out of the airport, Andrew drove them to the city center and entered an apartment complex. Andrew helped them carry the few pieces of luggage they had, and then took them to the apartment on the 6th floor. Opening the door, the apartment wasn't too big, and there wasn't much furniture inside. In fact, many things seemed new. The floor was covered with anti-slip floorboards, and the decoration style was simple yet cozy, making people feel comfortable and at ease, giving it a homey atmosphere. Lydia's eyes sparkled slightly. "Andrew, where did you find this apartment? What is wrong? Are you not satisfied?" Andrew felt a bit nervous, worried that his arrangement might not meet her expectations. Lydia turned to look at him, smiling lightly. "No, I am very satisfied. You must thank the landlord for me. It is such a suitable apartment at such a cheap price." Andrew felt a bit shy and cleared his throat, touching his nose. "As long as you like it." Observing Andrew's behavior, Wythe thought to himself that maybe this apartment belonged to Andrew. But he was just too embarrassed to admit it. Wythe was indeed a genius. Knowing Lydia was planning to return to the country, Andrew had renovated his apartment, added some furniture, and even made a children's room, originally intending to lend it to Lydia and her son. However, he knew Lydia wouldn't agree, so he decided to rent it out instead. Thus, Lydia and her son settled in this unfamiliar yet familiar city. Lydia was in a very good mood. The apartment was located in the city center, close to the school, and had complete facilities nearby. During dinner, she couldn't help but ask her son, "Wythe, what gift do you think I should give Uncle Frayne as a token of appreciation?" She treated her son like an adult because, well, her son was smarter than her. Wythe earnestly lifted his head from his bowl, squinting his mischievous eyes. "The best gift would be to give yourself to him. He'll definitely like it." Ahem. Ahem. Lydia, who was sipping her soup, choked a bit. Setting down her bowl, she stared in surprise at her son sitting across from her. "Wythe!" Wythe calmly put down his chopsticks and wiped his mouth. "Mom, haven't you noticed how his eyes light up when he looks at you?" Lydia felt a bit speechless as she rested her hand on her forehead. Was her child really this perceptive? "Wythe, how many times have I told you to watch less television?" With his round, sparkling eyes, Wythe looked at Lydia seriously. "Mom, I'm not making this up. It's just that you're a bit slow. I can tell that Uncle Frayne likes you." Rolling her eyes, Lydia sighed. "Come on, did you notice that I don't like him?" "Of course I did. That's why I didn't let him stay for dinner earlier." Faced with Lydia's stunned expression, Wythe, feeling a bit helpless, furrowed his brows and added, "Mom, when are you going to help me find a dad?" "Well, I don't have any plans for that at the moment." Lydia looked at her son with some guilt. Although she had always tried to provide Wythe with a stable upbringing and a good life, she couldn't help but feel that she owed him the love of a father. In the 5 years of Wythe's life, she felt like she had let him down. Sometimes, Lydia couldn't help but wonder if Wythe would behave more like a normal child. If he had a father, instead, he was so mature and understanding, which only made her feel more sorry for him. Seeing the guilt and faint tears in his mother's eyes, Wythe knew that his mother was starting to overthink again. "Mom, although you don't like him for now, I think he's pretty nice. So I've already put him as the #1 candidate for dad. I'll continue to help Mom perfect the list of dad candidates." Wythe's soft voice, combined with his serious expression, was incredibly adorable. As Lydia pulled him into her lap, she felt her heart melting. "Wythe, sweetheart, Did someone tell you something that made you so eager to find a dad? You don't need to worry about these things because you already have a dad. Wythe, somewhat surprised, widened his eyes. It was the first time his mother had brought up the topic of his father on her own. This was an opportunity not to be missed. Really? Where's my dad? What's his name? What does he look like? Looking into the bright, shining eyes of her son cradled in her arms, Lydia found herself unexpectedly lost in memories. Although it has been 6 years since then, the details of that night are as deep as engraved in her memory. Although she did not see that person's face, but that handsome body, that smooth and perfect muscle lines, and that memory fragment that makes people blush. But these years will often appear in her dreams. Lydia even still remembers the touch of the other party's fingers wandering on her skin, that kind of gentle but domineering touch, making people almost lose their own sanity and can only follow the other party's lead, wandering in the ocean of desire, unable to extricate themselves. Lydia's face reddened a little. Her mind floated back to the unforgettable scene of that year, that person's low gasp in her ear, domineering and powerful kisses, as if she wanted to knead her whole body into her body, and woke up with a glimpse of her, but also let her from then on that figure engraved in her heart. Over the years, Lydia has been pursued by a lot of people, but I don't know why. She will always subconsciously compare herself to the man who had a one-night stand with her. Even though she didn't even see each other's faces clearly, but she can't help but want to find that figure. "Mom, you are drooling," with a serious expression on his chubby face and a tissue held out to her. Lydia snapped out of those ambiguous memories. She awkwardly patted her flushed cheeks and said, "Sweetheart, I need to use the restroom." Then Lydia slipped away as if escaping, leaving Wythe, the little boy, silently pondering. He thought to himself, "I really should find Mama a man as soon as possible." In the restroom, Lydia splashed her face with water, staring at the flushed woman in the mirror, feeling ashamed and wishing she could just disappear. What was she doing? How did she end up reminiscing about that absurd night again? The cold water helped soothe her emotions a bit, and the heat in her cheeks subsided slightly. She laughed at herself, reminiscing here while the other person might have long forgotten about her. Moreover, in the vast sea of humanity, perhaps she would never encounter that man again in her lifetime. Lydia felt a bit melancholic, thinking about the longing in her son's eyes whenever he mentioned his father. Sometimes she even felt guilty, wondering if things would be different if she hadn't hidden under the covers that day, but confronted the man responsible for that absurd night. But she knew it was impossible. At that time, she couldn't have faced that absurd night calmly, let alone asked a stranger to take responsibility. At least fate had been fair to her, giving her the most adorable baby when she lost everything else. Lydia wiped her face again, her gaze becoming clear and determined as she lifted her head. The past was already in the past. Now she had her adorable baby, her beloved job, and of course, the unforgettable hatred. Early the next morning, Lydia received a call from Andrew, saying he wanted to treat them to a welcome-back celebration. Lydia felt a bit resigned. This was just how Andrew was sometimes, so considerate that she couldn't even bring herself to refuse. After quickly getting herself and Wythe dressed, Lydia took Wythe downstairs. Andrew had been waiting for half an hour, but there was no trace of displeasure on his face. He enjoyed this waiting process, watching his beloved step closer to him step by step. His heart felt warm, and his smile softened even more. "Good morning, Andrew." "Good morning, Wythe," with his serious expression as usual and a hint of confusion in his eyes, indicating he hadn't fully woken up, looked adorably drowsy. Lydia affectionately ruffled Wythe's hair. "Sweetheart, you can sleep a bit more in the car." Andrew felt a bit embarrassed. "Did I come too early and disturb you? After all, you just came back from Paris, and I am sure the jet lag hasn't worn off yet. I am really sorry." Lydia couldn't help but laugh at his awkwardness. "Andrew, You are overthinking it. We just slept a bit late yesterday. No big deal. So, where are we going today? You are our tour guide, so we'll follow your lead. Let's start with breakfast. I know a great place. Thank you. Andrew. With Wythe in tow, Lydia got into the car. The little guy indeed hadn't fully woken up. As soon as he got in the car, he yawned and fell asleep again. Watching Lydia's gentle gaze in the rearview mirror, Andrew's heart rippled. He even wished this moment could freeze forever, allowing him to stay with the person he liked. After breakfast, Wythe, who had slept in the car, finally woke up. The breakfast place Andrew recommended was excellent, making Lydia feel even more appreciative of his thoughtfulness. As they drove, Wythe quietly observed the interaction between his mother and Andrew. After breakfast, the three of them discussed where to go next. Andrew politely asked for Lydia's opinion, and Lydia turned to Wythe, saying, "Wythe, is there anywhere you want to go? Mom is usually busy with work and doesn't have time to be with you. These 2 days are rare, so let's enjoy some quality time together." Okay. Wythe rested his chin on his hand, his face serious as if contemplating some profound life question, his big, bright eyes carrying a hint of mischief. "Can we go anywhere?" "Of course." Andrew took over the conversation. "Where would you like to go, Wythe? The aquarium? Amusement park? Or a children's playhouse?" Pouting, Wythe gave Andrew a haughty look. "Uncle, those places are for 3-year-old kids. They're boring." Andrew was taken aback. His usually refined expression showed a moment of surprise. He looked at Lydia as if asking, "Did I hear correctly?" Lydia couldn't help but sigh inwardly. "Wythe, didn't I tell you to watch less television? You learned about bars from television, didn't you?" Feeling wronged, Wythe pouted. "Mom, you said we could go anywhere. Can't adults keep their promises?" "Mom, you are lying to kids." Being cute was his specialty. As he spoke, Wythe curled up into a ball, looking like a dejected kitten with his head down, exuding an air of melancholy. Lydia couldn't help but soften her heart. Thinking back, Wythe had never asked for anything specific from her since he was little. Though his sudden request was surprising, maybe he was just genuinely curious. Seeing Wythe's downcast expression, Lydia couldn't help but sigh. "If you want to go, we can." Wythe immediately looked up, his eyes sparkling. He silently extended his little finger, gesturing a yes in his heart. Andrew, on the other hand, looked at Lydia in surprise. "Lydia, are you really going to take Wythe to a bar? He has to learn about the world sooner or later. It is better for him to learn with us than on his own later. Andrew, do you know any good bars around here?" Watching Lydia's serious gaze, Andrew hesitated. "But he is only 5 years old. Isn't it too early for him to experience these things?" Lydia couldn't help but smile wryly. How could she tell Andrew that Wythe's intelligence and emotional quotient were off the charts far beyond ordinary children? Andrew didn't understand that Wythe couldn't be judged by the standards of regular kids. Andrew didn't say much more, just drove them to the bar street. On the way, Wythe widened his eyes, curious about the scenery outside the window, his expectant expression making the two adults in the car exchange glances. But little did they know Wythe's true purpose in coming here. He had researched online, bars were the best places for men and women to interact successfully. In order to find other potential daddy candidates as soon as possible, Wythe had deliberately chosen such a place. Otherwise, with his mother's indecisiveness, who knew when she would find a suitable daddy for him, Wythe gave himself a mental pat on the back for his cleverness. As the car entered the bar street, they unexpectedly couldn't find a parking spot. Andrew had no choice but to let Lydia and Wythe get off first, so they wouldn't have to walk an extra distance later. However, Wythe insisted on going with Andrew to park, leaving Lydia waiting alone. Luckily, It was daytime, and most of the bars weren't open yet. The few that were already open were upscale and posh. So safety wasn't an issue, though Lydia didn't know what her son was up to, since she had agreed to let him plan the day. She didn't object. However, as she leaned against the wall, waiting for Andrew and Wythe to arrive, she unexpectedly witnessed a melodramatic scene. Just less than 10 meters away from Lydia, a man briskly pushed open the glass door of a bar, his face grim as he walked out. Immediately after, a scantily clad woman hurried after him. The man ahead kept his head low, his disheveled hair falling over his forehead, obscuring his features as he walked, making it difficult to see his face. However, his tense jawline and brisk pace indicated his current mood was far from good. Most importantly, this figure seemed somewhat familiar to Lydia. "Lambert, I beg you. This time it is my mistake. Please forgive me. I won't dare again." The woman's delicate makeup had long been blurred by tears, quickly turning her face into a soaked palette. She tightly grasped the man's clothes, unwilling to let go. Lambert stared at the woman before him, his gaze holding the brewing storm of emotions within, showing his immense displeasure. She had quite the nerve, daring to drug his drink. However, Lambert didn't act immediately because this foolish woman was merely a pawn. He was more interested in who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. He naturally had to keep this woman around, using her as bait to catch bigger prey. Seeing Lambert completely ignore her, the woman didn't care about anything else, directly reaching out and grabbing Lambert's sleeve. Lambert instinctively waved his hand, and the woman was flung far away, unable to get up for a while. Lambert's face darkened, his eyes filled with a chilling light. He stood there, looking down at the woman who had been thrown away, and spat out a single word. "Fook, away!" The woman trembled as she lay on the ground, her curled hair hiding her expression. However, the cold sweat on her forehead indicated her current condition wasn't too good. Lambert sneered, disdainfully glancing at the woman on the ground, then strode away with his long legs. "Hey, stop!" A clear and lively voice sounded from beside him. Lambert turned his head and met an angry face. The beautifully delicate features looked even more captivating with the anger. The slender eyebrows furrowed slightly. The anger in the eyes almost seemed to ignite fully, and the bright red lips tightly pursed, as if trying to restrain the anger within. She is calling him. Lambert was somewhat surprised. A hint of doubt flashed in his dark eyes, but quickly returned to calmness. What? Lydia was on the verge of going mad with anger at this scumbag. Even though she was a bit far away and couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, hitting a woman was definitely not right. Filled with rage, Lydia first went forward to help the woman up, and then she stopped the man who was about to leave. As soon as the woman was helped up by Lydia, she bowed her head and thanked Lydia before hurrying away as if fleeing, clearly feeling guilty. Lydia didn't notice this because she saw the man's face turning towards her, and she was utterly dumbfounded. It was the pervert who had been misbehaving in the restroom. Lambert's eyes stared closely at Lydia's face, his expressionless face exuding an indifferent aura that made people inexplicably fearful. Lydia felt a bit intimidated, but she secretly clenched her fists to encourage herself. Don't you think what you did just now was too much? Is it necessary to be so brutal to a woman? I think you owe that woman an apology. Do you know her? Lambert interrupted Lydia's words, his gaze sharp as he looked into her eyes, as if trying to discern something from her face. Lydia was suddenly puzzled by the question, and instinctively replied, "No, I don't know her." "Then, what does it have to do with you and her?" Lambert replied coldly, his tone indifferent and calm, as if nothing had happened before. I just can't stand your attitude. No matter what, you shouldn't hit a woman." Lambert didn't defend himself. only staring at Lydia's face with his deep eyes, making Lydia feel as if he was looking at his lover. She blushed slightly and felt a bit guilty under his gaze. She glared at Lambert fiercely, intending to leave, but was suddenly grabbed by the wrist from behind. Lambert's grip was strong. With a forceful tug, Lydia was spun around and collided into his arms. Then he took a few steps forward, his figure disappearing into the shadowy corner. The sudden turn of events left Lydia bewildered and confused. Their current position was quite ambiguous. Lambert pressed Lydia against the wall in the corner, one hand holding hers and the other resting on her waist. The warm breath, mixed with a hint of mint, emanated from the man, making Lydia's head spin. What was happening now? Just as Lydia was about to struggle, the man tightened his grip on her waist, and she almost had no doubt that if she moved recklessly, this man would break her waist. Just as she was about to speak, a sexy low growl sounded in her ear. "Be quiet!" Footsteps approached their location in a flurry, and it seemed there were quite a few people. After looking around for a while, a woman's voice was heard. They were just here. A woman was holding Lambert back. Damn it! He must have escaped. Such a good opportunity wasted by him running away. It is all your damn fault. You can't even lay a drug without getting caught. A man's voice cursed, sounding harsh. Lydia recognized the voice of the woman from earlier, and she was somewhat surprised, looking at Lambert with a puzzled expression. What is going on? Shouldn't this be a scene of a scumbag ditching girl? Why does this man now sound like the victim? Is it a misunderstanding? Seeing the confusion in the woman's eyes, Lambert felt somewhat amused. His gaze towards the woman deepened. What is going on? Lydia's face was full of doubt, silently asking Lambert. However, Lambert seemed not to answer her question, just pursing his lips tightly, his gaze deeply fixed on her face. Lydia felt a bit embarrassed under his intense stare, awkwardly turning her head away, inadvertently revealing her snow-white, delicate neck, shimmering faintly under the light. Unbelievably beautiful. A pleasant fragrance lingered around Lambert's nose, his body tensing up, subconsciously rubbing against her. The people outside hadn't left yet, still muttering complaints. Lydia felt tense all over, embarrassed and annoyed. So embarrassing. The man was too close to her, so close that Lydia could clearly see his long eyelashes. Undeniably, this man was very handsome. Seemingly the type Lydia liked, so she couldn't help but blush, unconsciously shrinking in his embrace to avoid that sharp gaze. However, the next moment, Lydia suddenly felt something scorching pressing against her waist. She stiffened for a moment, widened her eyes, and looked at the man in front of her with a blush on her face. But there was a hint of annoyance in her eyes. Lambert was also somewhat surprised. It was just a hug, yet the faint fragrance emanating from the woman made him have a physical reaction. Indeed, even after 6 years, this woman still had the same captivating effect on him. Curses tumbled at Lydia's lips. Stop! But before she could finish, a domineering and fiery kiss swept over, swallowing up all the words she hadn't said. The soft and scorching lips nibbled and licked at Lydia's lips, leaving her mind blank. A strange yet familiar sensation spread from the depth of her heart, tingling and comfortable, like tiny electric currents coursing through her skin, making Lydia's limbs weak. But it was just a kiss. The agile tongue was like an arrogant invader, ignoring everything as it pried open Lydia's teeth and slipped into her mouth, entwining with her small lilac tongue, fighting for every inch of territory in her mouth, even stealing her breath away. Lydia only felt her scalp tingling, her body slightly weakening. The dominant lips and tongue left her defenseless, and she could only widen her eyes, letting the other party do as they pleased. Breathing became difficult, and if it weren't for the wall behind her supporting her, she would have almost slipped to the ground. The indifference in the man's eyes carried a faint smile, making his already charming eyes even more attractive, shining like stars in the night sky. Lydia felt like she was back to that night 6 years ago, helpless and longing, allowing the person on her body to control everything, not even knowing when the other party would stop, and she just drowned in it. "Hey, are you back to your senses?" Like the low, husky tones of a cello, the voice smashed into Lydia's ears. Abruptly waking her up, she raised her head and met a pair of mocking eyes, suddenly infuriated, thinking about how she had been inexplicably molested by this man. Lydia's face flushed with heat. "You, bastard!" Lydia was furious and lost her temper, not mincing her words. She then noticed that the people who had chased after them earlier seemed to have left. Lambert extended his slender fingers, lightly touching Lydia's delicate red lips. The mockery in his eyes didn't diminish. "Is that so? It seems like you enjoyed it too." Before Lambert could finish his sentence, he felt a sharp blow between his legs. The spot that was previously alert suddenly became limp with pain. His usually calm and indifferent face twisted slightly, veins popping on his forehead in an instant. Lydia pushed Lambert away all of a sudden, and then, with her chin raised slightly, she looked at the man's pained face, and seemingly not relieved. She fiercely kicked him in the leg. Caught off guard, Lambert was hit straight on, his temples throbbing, and rare anger surged in his eyes. After Lydia did all this, she made a face at him, snorted, and proudly turned around. "We're even now!" Then, Lydia hurriedly walked away. It had been quite some time, and she didn't know if Wythe and Andrew had been looking for her. Lambert's deep gaze followed Lydia's slender figure and the still blushing neck, and suddenly something deep in his heart moved quietly. Thinking of her previous proud and mischievous appearance, he couldn't help but slowly curl up the corners of his lips. Interesting. In fact, Lydia wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. She knew clearly that if the man hadn't timely reminded her just now, she might have lost control. It was really embarrassing. However, that domineering posture and kiss made her feel strangely familiar. Shaking her head, Lydia cleared away the scenes that made her blush, and her heart beat faster from her mind, and quickly ran to meet her son. When Wythe and Andrew arrived together, they saw Lydia leaning against the wall with a vacant look in her eyes, not knowing what she was thinking. Andrew felt like Lydia's current appearance was more charming than before, like a rose growing in a greenhouse, nourished by rain. Wythe's lively eyes darted mischievously, tugging at Lydia's clothes. Lydia instinctively crouched down, asking in a low voice, "What is wrong, sweetheart?" Wythe, with his sharp nose, smelled a refreshing scent of mint, a scent he had never smelled before. Not from Mom, nor from Andrew. So Wythe widened his big eyes, squinted slightly, and leaned close to Lydia's ear, asking in a low voice, "Mom, did you find Daddy number 2? Lydia's mind flashed back to the earlier embarrassing scene, and her ears suddenly heated up, feeling embarrassed to be guessed by her son. She couldn't help but gently pat Wythe's small head. "Silly boy, what nonsense are you talking about?" A knowing smile flickered in Wythe's beautiful eyes. It seemed that Mom had indeed found the second candidate. "Well, the more, the merrier. Say den, Hody." After this welcoming banquet, Lydia also began to immerse herself in work again. This time, she returned from Paris with 2 main objectives. Firstly, she aimed to penetrate the domestic market with her clothing brand that she had established. Secondly, of course, she was determined to reclaim what rightfully belonged to her. Standing by the window gazing at the distant gloomy sky, Lydia's eyes were filled with determination. "Ron, Maggie. I am back. Are you ready?" "Mom, I am ready to go." Wythe's voice brought Lydia back to the present. Turning to her son, whom she was proud of, Lydia asked gently, Wythe, you don't mind Mummy enrolling you, do you? Wythe shrugged. Whatever, it is just kindergarten. Though being with a bunch of kids might be boring, geniuses also needed a childhood. As long as Mom was happy, Lydia smiled and ruffled his hair, though she knew her son was a genius and had self-studied up to the level of middle school textbooks. In Lydia's eyes, Wythe was only a 5-year-old child. He should have some interaction with kids his age to better integrate into society. Therefore, Lydia helped her son enroll in a nearby kindergarten. Although it seemed to make Wythe somewhat dissatisfied, as the saying goes, a mother knows her child best. Lydia knew the little guy would understand. After dropping Wythe off at the kindergarten, Lydia glanced at the time, 8:35. Her meeting with Universal Conglomerate was scheduled for 9 o'clock. Could she make it to Universal Conglomerate from here in 25 minutes? Lydia frowned slightly, feeling anxious. This was her first battle after returning to the country, the success or failure of her clothing brand. Nocturne, in entering the domestic market, depended on this moment. Although Lydia had already gained fame as a prominent designer in Paris and had been admired by many in Parisian high society, she felt a bit apprehensive about returning home. The reason she chose to cooperate with Universal Conglomerate this time was twofold. On one hand, she was attracted by Universal Conglomerate's substantial assets. Once the contract was signed successfully, she wouldn't need to worry about packaging and selling her products domestically. She could focus solely on designing. On the other hand, she valued Universal Conglomerate's good reputation. Strictly speaking, Universal Conglomerate had numerous subsidiaries, and this time, she was only collaborating with one of its divisions called Universal Apparel, which primarily dealt with various top-tier clothing brands. Once the collaboration was successful, it would be a definite affirmation of Lydia's efforts over the years. Lydia took a deep breath, silently encouraging herself. She would definitely succeed. As the car turned a corner, Lydia gradually eased off the accelerator. Suddenly, a figure darted out from the side. Lydia was startled, and she immediately slammed on the brakes. Screech! Bang! The sound of the wheels scraping against the ground made Lydia's heart race. Then, she heard a thud, and her heart leaped into her throat. Following that, a cry of pain came from outside the car. Ah, my leg! Lydia's face paled. She hurriedly got out of the car to check the situation. Fortunately, there was no gruesome scene with blood splattering everywhere, which somewhat eased Lydia's mind. However, the situation before her didn't seem optimistic. A middle-aged man lay in front of her car, wearing a suit that still seemed intact. Beside him, a briefcase lay on the ground, with documents scattered around. There was a slight dent in the front of the car, resembling the aftermath of hitting someone. The man was clutching his leg tightly, wailing, "Ah, my leg is broken. It hurts so much." Lydia furrowed her brow. Although she might have been distracted at the time, she had slammed on the brakes the moment she saw the person. Moreover, although she had heard a collision, it didn't sound like the impact of a physical body. But looking at his painful expression, it didn't seem like an act. For a moment, Lydia felt extremely troubled. "Sir, you should get up first, or let me take you to the hospital for a checkup," Lydia suggested, but the man glared at her fiercely, grabbing her clothes. "My leg hurts so much. It must be broken. You want me to get up first. Don't you want to take responsibility?" Lydia hurriedly tried to help him up. "No, that is not it. I said we should go to the hospital first for a proper examination. If there is any problem, I'll make sure you get treated." The man's expression turned anxious upon hearing this. He grabbed Lydia's clothes even tighter. "I know you want to run away. If I go to the hospital, you'll just leave me there. And where will I find you?" Seeing the man's anxious and pitiful face, Lydia felt confused. Could it really be that she accidentally hit someone? Ring, ring. The ringing of her phone reminded Lydia that she was running out of time. She frowned anxiously. She absolutely couldn't be late for this collaboration meeting, but this man in front of her was unwilling to resolve the situation quickly. "Sir, I really have urgent matters to attend to. How about this? I'll leave my phone number, and you go to the hospital first for a checkup. I'll come as soon as possible." "That won't do." The man was relentless. "If you run away, what then?" Sweat began to bead on Lydia's forehead. Her usually confident eyes now showed rare signs of confusion and helplessness. She had never encountered such a situation before, and the man's aggressive behavior was driving her crazy. Lydia pursed her lips, trying to calm herself down. "Sir, let go of my clothes first. What do you want me to do so that you'll believe me?" A smug expression flashed across the man's face, though it quickly disappeared into his pretense of pain. "You can give me some money. Even if I go to the hospital, I won't feel at ease." "How much do you want?" 100,000. At this point, Lydia knew she was dealing with a scam. Her sympathetic gaze turned into anger. "Sir, I didn't hit you at all. I won't give you any money. If you continue like this, I'll call the police." To her surprise, instead of being frightened, the man tightened his grip on Lydia's clothes and brazenly shouted, "Fine. Call the police. I knew it. You hit someone and want to escape. When the police come, we'll see who is right." Oh, it hurts so much." The man continued to moan loudly, drawing the attention of many passers-by. They pointed and whispered as they looked at Lydia's car, which had a dent in the front. "Look, this girl seems pretty, but why did she do such a stupid thing? Look at the front of the car. It is all smashed. She even wants to run away." Each accusation made Lydia's fair face flush with embarrassment. She didn't know if it was shame or anger that filled her, especially when the man pretending to be injured continued to cry out, "Can someone help me reason with her? She broke my leg, and now I am disabled. I might even lose my job, let alone support my wife and child." The man sniffled and shed tears, immediately eliciting sympathy from many people. Lydia wanted to defend herself, but she didn't know how to start. She could only feel frustrated and angry. This scene was observed by the owner of a Maybach, parked on the roadside from beginning to end. Coincidentally, the owner was Lambert. His driver, Bob, noticed that his boss was unusually interested in watching a roadside drama. He couldn't help but analyze, "That guy is obviously trying to extort money." As soon as he spoke, he asked for 100,000. It is obvious he is trying to cheat. "Oh, what would you do if you were in his shoes?" Lambert's cold voice resounded in the car, authoritative yet indifferent. Bob snorted disdainfully. "Since he wants money. Sure, break his leg for real before talking." Lambert's eyes narrowed slightly, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Fine, leave this matter to you." "Huh?" Bob didn't understand at first, but he soon realized that his boss wasn't joking. As a qualified bodyguard, he quickly understood his boss's intention. It was time for a hero rescue. "Bring the check over," Lambert ordered. Bob immediately understood, taking out a check from his bag and respectfully handing it to Lambert. After Lambert swiftly signed his name and filled in the amount, Bob quickly got out of the car and headed towards the growing crowd. Leaning back slightly, Lambert's deep black eyes focused on Lydia's bewildered face. They met again. As Lambert leisurely watched the scene unfold, Lydia was on the verge of panic. Her phone's ringing reminded her that it was already 8:50. And it seemed like she would be late for her important meeting. Meeting for the first time, and being late already. Would UC still trust her as a business partner? But this man was stubbornly holding on to her, refusing to let her leave. Lydia was on the brink of insanity. "Hey, let go of me." Just when Lydia felt helpless, a tall and burly man emerged from the crowd, glaring fiercely at the man causing trouble. It was Lambert's bodyguard, Bob. The man hesitated for a moment, instinctively letting go of Lydia's hand. She quickly stepped aside, feeling relieved, and glanced gratefully at Bob. The man who had been trying to extort money was momentarily intimidated by Bob's imposing figure. However, driven by the prospect of the hefty sum, he couldn't back down. He clenched his teeth and asked Bob, "Who are you? What is it to you?" Looking down at the man, Bob replied, "It doesn't matter who I am. You just want money, right? How much do you want?" Bob's years of experience as a bodyguard made him appear fierce and unfriendly. Even the man trying to extort money was sweating profusely under his gaze. He stuttered, "100,000. Well, that is not too much." The man's hopeful expression faded as Bob continued. 200,000, he insisted, shamelessly doubling the amount. Lydia grabbed Bob's arm urgently. "Sir, I appreciate your help, but this man is clearly a fraud. I didn't bump into him." "What did you say?" "You didn't bump into me. I knew you'd try to deny it. Did my leg break itself?" The man shouted, his face turning red with anger, while Lydia blushed with embarrassment. "Relax. I didn't say I wouldn't pay," Bob reassured the man. The man's eyes lit up. Bob then tossed the pre-signed check to him. "Take a look. Does the number match?" The man picked up the check and confirmed the amount, nodding vigorously. "Yes, it is 100,000, but want 200? No way, then I'll call the police," Bob interrupted. The man's previous pained expression vanished, and he waved his hand dismissively. "Fine, I'll take the loss. If you have urgent matters, go ahead, I'll go to the hospital myself." But Bob sneered, "No need to hurry. Since you've confirmed it, shouldn't we also confirm something else?" "What do you mean?" the man asked, bewildered. "Of course, we need to confirm if your leg is really broken." With that, Bob raised his foot and kicked the man's leg bone. There was a crisp sound, and the man's leg appeared in a strangely twisted shape. "Ah!" The man screamed in agony, unable to utter a word. The onlookers fell silent, stunned by the scene. Bob chuckled. "Fool, if you are going to fake an accident, at least do it professionally. Who would have so much strength to talk with a broken leg?" Lydia was also baffled by this sudden turn of events. What was going on? Among the onlookers, someone spoke up, puzzled. "How could you break the man's leg? Even if his leg wasn't broken by the car, it is a fact that the front of the car was damaged. How can you say he is a fraud?" Bob glanced at the person. "Are you with him? Didn't you see what was in his briefcase?" Some curious individuals approached and found the briefcase surprisingly heavy. Upon opening it, they exclaimed, "It is a slab of stone." The spectators who had been supporting the fraudster were at a loss for words. This guy came prepared. The damaged car was probably his doing. The crowd dispersed in an instant. Gratefully, Lydia approached Bob. "Thank you so much. I'll repay you the money." Bob waved his hand, pointing to the car parked not far away. "Don't thank me. It is our boss's orders, and he is the one footing the bill." Following Bob's gaze, Lydia saw a pair of deep eyes and a slightly mocking smile. It was him. Too coincidental. No, it was too unfortunate. She always seemed to meet him at her most embarrassing moments. "Oh, why did this always happen?" Lambert looked at Lydia steadily. Seeing her standing still, he couldn't help but remind her, "Aren't you getting in the car?" Almost as if under a spell, Lydia walked over and slipped into the car, only to realize that the door had been locked by Lambert. Meanwhile, Bob stood outside, understanding the situation and awaiting orders. His eyes betrayed a hint of curiosity, so the boss and this lady knew each other. Bob, handle this situation. Get the lady's car repaired, and as for that man, clean up the mess, Lambert instructed. Yes, sir, Bob responded promptly, clearly eager to get on with it. Satisfied. Lambert stepped on the gas. Lydia suddenly realized she had inexplicably gotten into this man's car. She felt annoyed with herself. It wasn't her fault. It was just that this man exuded such overwhelming dominance that it made people want to submit to him. She never knew she had a fangirl side. Being inexplicably attracted to a man, the atmosphere became awkward, and even soft music couldn't ease the tension. Lydia squirmed uncomfortably in her seat, earning a low chuckle from Lambert. Every time he encountered this woman, he inexplicably felt good. She always brought him interesting surprises. Do I have bugs in my car? Lambert teased, noticing Lydia's flushed face as she lowered her head and coughed. Embarrassed. Lydia murmured a thank you. Oh, how do you plan to thank me? Lambert's gaze was deep as he looked at Lydia's face through the rearview mirror. Lydia was momentarily speechless. Honestly, she didn't know how to thank this person. Though it might be a small favor for him, Lydia didn't want to owe him this kindness. Just as Lydia furrowed her brow, pondering how to properly thank him, Lambert suddenly spoke up. By the way, I don't know your name yet. Lydia Guilford. Lambert Halsey. The two exchanged names and fell into silence again. Lydia felt awkward and uneasy, almost forgetting about the cooperative meeting she was already late for. Fortunately, Lambert reminded her in time. Where are you rushing to? Lydia was taken aback, her expression instantly turning grim. Oh no, my cooperative meeting! She glanced at the time. It was 8:58. Even if she flew there, she probably wouldn't make it to UC on time. She felt a sense of disappointment. What is wrong? Where are you headed? Do you know about Universal Conglomerate? I have a meeting at 9, but it seems hopeless now. Lydia felt extremely disheartened, almost wanting to give up and go back home. But thinking about the importance of this collaboration, she gathered herself. It wasn't over until it was over. And she didn't want to give up just yet. She still wanted to rush there, give her best effort, and show her sincerity to the other party. With her fists clenched in determination, Lydia didn't notice the fleeting gleam in Lambert's eyes when he heard the name Universal Conglomerate. Lost in her own thoughts, Lydia didn't realize Lambert had dialed a number. Hello, this is Lambert. The manager at the branch office was very surprised to receive a call from the boss and couldn't help but be nervous. Good morning, sir. Is there anything I can assist you with? You had a meeting this morning? Yes, sir. A cooperative meeting scheduled to start at 9, but the representatives from the collaborating party haven't arrived yet. We were planning to cancel. Who is the collaborating party? It seems to be a designer returning from Paris, named Lydia Guilford. Okay. Postpone the meeting by half an hour. I'll come over to attend it. After Lambert hung up, the branch manager stood by the phone in bewilderment until his assistant walked in. Manager, what is wrong? The manager snapped out of his daze and put down the phone, back to his usual efficient self. Quick! Inform the senior management team, drop all current tasks, and prepare to welcome Mr. Halsey's arrival. Also, the previously planned meeting that was about to be cancelled, postpone it by half an hour. The assistant looked dumbfounded. Mr. Halsey is coming. The manager glared at him. What are you standing there for? Go inform everyone. Yes, I am going. The big news had to be communicated to everyone in the company as soon as possible. The manager's assistant hurried off, alone. The manager stared at the cooperation file on his desk, momentarily lost in thought. How could the boss suddenly attach so much importance to such a small collaboration? Did he miss something? No time to dwell on it. Welcoming the boss's inspection was the priority. As Lydia came back to reality after hearing him make the call, she spoke with some guilt. "Do you have a meeting this morning too? I am really sorry for taking up your time because of my situation." Lambert's eyes were deep, his lips curling slightly. A smile that seemed like a smile. "It is okay. Maybe you can drop me off nearby, and I'll take a cab from there," Lydia suddenly suggested, but unexpectedly, Lambert refused. "No need. It is on my way anyway." Lydia bit her lip, feeling both guilty and touched. The atmosphere fell into silence once again, and she didn't notice the hint of a smile in Lambert's eyes. When he heard the name Universal Conglomerate, the car raced all the way and finally arrived at the UC gate at 9:20. Lydia hastily got out of the car, as she was about to ask for Lambert's contact information to repay him. His car had already driven off. Lydia felt inexplicably disappointed. After coming back to her senses, she looked at UC in front of her, took a deep breath, and thought to herself, forget it. Both he and the others already knew his name. Other matters could be dealt with later. It was crucial to handle the collaboration first. As soon as she stepped into the UC gate, Lydia felt a strange tension in the air. She couldn't help but sigh. Little did she know, the staff of the UC branch were all nervous and excited. They heard that the boss was about to inspect, but they didn't know what prompted him to come this time. Under the Universal International umbrella, there were countless branch offices. Though UC had always performed well, the boss rarely visited except during the annual meeting. This year was an exception. Lydia was unaware of all this. After registering at the front desk, she was led to the office of the UC branch manager by an assistant manager. As the door opened, Lydia immediately put on her best demeanor. All her previous anxieties disappeared, replaced by a perfect professional smile. "Hello, Stephen. I am Lydia, the one you scheduled the meeting with." "Hello." Stephen glanced at Lydia, her appearance dignified, her demeanor elegant, and her face beautiful. However, there were many beautiful women like her. He wondered why the boss took a personal interest in this collaboration meeting. Was it because of her talent? There were countless talented designers among the studios affiliated with UC, but none had the privilege of meeting the boss in person. Stephen speculated. It was probably just a whim of the boss. Lydia felt Stephen's gaze was a bit strange, but she thought it might be because she was late. It was understandable for him to be displeased. She lowered her head slightly and sincerely apologized. "I am really sorry. I know I was late. It is my fault. But I hope your company can give me another chance to showcase my designs and the development prospects after our collaboration. I know this request is a bit much, but I hope you can consider it carefully. In fact, you are not late. You are just in time. If you don't mind, let me take you to the conference room. We can talk while we walk, okay? But wasn't the meeting scheduled for 9? Lydia asked in surprise. Stephen didn't want to go into details. Oh, the meeting was delayed for some reason. Please come this way. Lydia felt as if she had won the lottery. The immense joy made her smile even brighter. She had thought the collaboration was hopeless, but now it seemed like there was a glimmer of hope again. Could it be that even the heavens were helping her? As Lydia followed Stephen into the conference room, she noticed that many people were already seated. Most of them were high-level officials from Universal Conglomerate's branch offices. Stephen introduced Lydia and led her to the seat that had been arranged for her long ago. Lydia's eyes swept over the name tags of the people present. Feeling surprised, it seemed UC attached great importance to this collaboration. Amidst her astonishment, she also felt happy. With such attention, the chances of successful collaboration were high. With a smile, Lydia greeted everyone. Hello, everyone. I am Lydia Guilford, representing the collaborating party. Everyone nodded in response. As Lydia sat down, she noticed that there was still an empty chair beside her. None of the people present showed any signs of impatience or waiting. Lydia secretly wondered if someone else was going to join them. Seemingly sensing Lydia's confusion, Stephen explained, "Please wait a moment, Miss Guilford. Our boss is very interested in this collaboration and has decided to attend the meeting in person." Lydia's heart skipped a beat. Universal International's boss. Entertainment gossip often mentioned this mysterious boss, but each time failed to capture his face. Rumor had it that this mysterious boss never appeared in the media. Some speculated he was too ugly to show his face, but reliable sources claimed that he was a true handsome man who just didn't like trouble. Under the leadership of this mysterious boss, Universal International had become a globally renowned conglomerate in just 2 years, with annual revenues reaching billions, a true commercial giant. And now, Stephen told Lydia that the boss was interested in her collaboration project. This was undoubtedly a great affirmation for Lydia. She couldn't hide her excitement, indicating that her chances of success had increased. The conference room fell silent. Everyone seemed to be nervously staring at the door. As it was about to be pushed open, everyone suddenly stood up. Lydia subconsciously followed suit. Then, she froze. The man who entered was dressed in a black suit, a dark blue tie neatly tied around the collar of his white shirt. His well-crafted trousers enveloped his straight, powerful legs. Even standing there, he seemed like a god descending to earth. Without uttering a word, his piercing eyes already silenced everyone in the room. Lydia blinked, repeatedly confirming if she was seeing things correctly. Meanwhile, Lambert, noticing her subtle movements, couldn't help but soften his gaze. "Miss Guilford, hello. I am Lambert Halsey, the CEO of Universal International. Welcome."